Check podcasts.
The Bread and Butter Collective is a collection of hospitality professionals working together to help strengthen our industry to build strong culture, community, and sustainability.
I'm Kalen McNeil.
And I'm Sam Jones. And this is the Bread and Butter Podcast.
Welcome to the Bread and Butter Podcast. How are you, Sam?
I'm doing, how am I doing,
How
Kalen?
are you doing? I think you're doing good.
I'm
I
doing
think we're
pretty
both
good.
We're pretty punchy today.
Yeah, I think punchy is a good word. I was
Yeah.
looking for good or fine or great or whatever, but no, there's something different in the energy today.
Yeah,
I feel a little punchy.
It's funny. Like, I was thinking about the last couple of days. Like, so since I got back from the World Series of Poker, I've been exhausted, and I've just been hard to get up. I need to sleep more, and I just felt like out of sorts.
Well, you were gone for 5 weeks, a month?
Yeah, I was gone for 5 weeks,
Okay.
which I typically takes a while to recover, but I just couldn't. I had no jump in my step, and because I've been back since July 15th or something, so we're approaching 2 months. Well, I guess it's a month and a half since I've been back. It feels like it's long. Is that right? July 15th, August 15th,
Wow.
September 15th.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only a month and a half. Oh my God. Oh,
But here you are.
Yeah.
You're back, and now you're
anyway,
awake.
I got a pep in my step this week. I feel energetic. I went for a spontaneous dip in the ocean yesterday afternoon on my way
Did you
home.
just fall in, or
No,
how
no.
spontaneous was it?
I just was driving home and I thought I want to go for a dip. And
no
I
way.
got all my dipping stuff in the car. So it's easy for me to do.
That's truly spontaneous.
Yeah, and
That's
I was
fun.
in there for 10 minutes and felt great and got out of it. And just, I've been reading this book too. Like, so I started reading again, which about 3 years ago, I made it. I watched Inside the Brain of Bill Gates or something, or it's in the mind of Bill Gates or Inside the Mind of Bill Gates or something. It's a documentary about Bill Gates and what he does. And he basically goes away for a week or 2 weeks a year and brings all his books to a cabin by himself, and he just reads.
Yeah.
So constant improving. And I remember, that year I read like 25 books. So I was off social media for the most part because it takes time to read that many books. So I read probably anywhere between 2 to 3 books a month.
Okay.
So some months I read 1 and other months I read 3. And varying topics. Like I'm interested in history. I'm interested in business. I'm interested in those types of things. And I still quote things from those books and talk about the books that I read all those years ago. And it was only 3 or 4 years ago. But I wanted to make it a goal of this year to read books. And I didn't read anything until probably, I read a little bit in the summer or at the beginning of the summer, and then I stopped. So I've basically got through 2 books halfway through.
Oh.
So this one book that I really, really love, the author is Bjorn Lomborg, he's
heard the name before.
Yeah,
but-
he wrote a book that I read called Humankind, and he's all about the betterment of the world. So I think his background is climate science.
Okay.
And he basically, in a lot of his books, he just talks about like practical solutions for making things better and also quieting the noise of all the polarization, like the dramatization of the issues. And people talk about climate change as being an existential threat to humanity, and he's just like, there's no scenario where it is an existential threat to humanity for him.
It's also not nothing.
Yeah, and it's not nothing,
and it's not nothing.
happening, and all those things. So
There's always a middle ground that's way more interesting to talk about than
because it's practical.
yes or no.
And he's even talking about the cost of climate change because, as climate change continues to affect the globe over the next 50, 100 years, inflation happens. So the cost actually, today's dollars, it goes down, So you think about the billions and trillions of dollars. 70, 80 years from now, that's going to be a small amount.
Yeah.
Plus, humans are very mobile. So, if we see lightning coming down, we can move over. If there's storms or sea rise, we can move. It's going to change the dynamic, but it isn't going to kill as many people as people are worried about.
We do have lots of room, and I heard a really interesting stat that may be not true, but if you could fit everyone in the world into the greater Los Angeles area.
Yeah, I believe
It's
that.
like, what? That leaves
Yeah.
the rest of the world empty.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we've got lots of resources, lots
There,
of space.
for sure, and it's not to say that this doesn't discount any of the things that should be done or we're doing or whatever, but it talks about global warming. Like majority of deaths are due to cold, as far as it relates to climate. So as the globe warms, there's less cold deaths, less deaths due to climate because there's less people dying of freezing to
Right.
death. People like a disproportionately less people die from heat. So if you're to have a
Right.
cold climate or hot climate, more people would die in the cold than they would in the heat.
So if it's warming,
It's warming.
we're gonna get some deaths, but not
Yeah.
as many as we would if it remained the same.
Yeah, exactly. So the
Or
death
was cold.
outcomes are, there's more extreme storms, which causes a different level of problem.
Sure.
We have obviously more fires, but it also, he emphasizes on the mitigation component of it, that you can, scream from the rooftops that there's, the devil's coming or the winter's coming or the world's ending, or you can actually be practical and fix the dike, in Abbotsford so that
Yeah, right.
the extreme water doesn't affect it as bad, or improve air conditioning, or fire mitigation through forest management and things like that, right? So I really like it. So one of the things that inspired me this week, this is a long way to get to this point, but has to do with our foundation. So we've donated, I think, close to 700,000 over the last 5 years. And part of that is customer funded because we charge 1% to our customers.
Right. So good job, everyone.
Great job, our customers. Thank you. And we match that. So, we're all in it. We get our suppliers to donate as well. So, I think our if you do the math, we probably donate 70% of the funds to our foundation, and our customers contribute 30 to 40 or 60-40. It's that in that mix because
Right on.
we do extra for our foundation. But having said that, we give a lot of money to a lot of great organizations, and they're all great. But this book, Best Things First, talks about what are the most efficient solutions for managing of the money. Like, how do you get the most bang for your buck is basically it. So he's got 12, of the world's cholera. You got malaria, you've got hunger, you've got, child nutrition, you've got, diseases, all the varying different things that happen around the world.
So is he picking 12 things that you get the most return for with the least amount of effort, and they're the lowest hanging fruit kind of?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a combination of that. So he's identified 12 of these global things, and the UN has come up with, and the powers that be have come up with, here's what our mandate is, and they're not even close to meeting their numbers.
Right.
But so there's a lot of money that circulates the problem, and this is what happens in all these areas is they create economies around the problem without a lot of effectiveness. So the money is there. Like the amount of money that is needed to fix these problems is there. It's just not being directed in the right way. And there's some reasons for that.
Yeah. Well, it's like all issues, right? You got your issue, you got people who are going to fix the issue, but that develops into its own economy. And then if they actually solve the issue, that economy disappears. And
That's right.
people are self-serving, and organizations are also self-serving. So the problem persists.
Yeah, the problem persists. So he breaks it down, and he's got a think tank, and these are like peer-reviewed programs and solutions. So, for example, malaria. They've really cut down malaria by getting these nets that have this pesticide on it. So, when you're sleeping in these countries that have malaria outbreaks, which, a lot of it is third world countries, lower income countries, it does two things. It protects you from the mosquitoes landing on you, but it also then poisons the mosquitoes. So the mosquitoes that are carrying the malaria virus die.
Right.
So it reduces it, but those nets are good for about 2 to 3 years as far as use goes. Then they need to be redistributed. But the mosquitoes are also creating antibodies to the pesticide. So they've changed the recipe of the pesticide, so now they need to redo that. But it's basically like $2.50 per net.
They're going to make super mosquitoes that are resistant to everything.
Well, that's another story. But in the come to the practical nature of how you get rid of a solution of reducing malaria is just investing the money in the nets and getting the nets. This is a simplification.
Yeah, which
of
are, well,
sense
and they're
to them.
cheap and they're easy.
They're easy
work.
to distribute. They work. The one issue is the knockoffs that don't work that people think they work. So it's about killing it. And it's made a big impact. I think it's reduced it by 50% or something. But you know, the UN and these people that come up with these mandates, they're halfway there to what they said they would be in the same amount of time. It's not that they're not doing other things. They're also investing a bunch of money in other things that aren't working. And, you know, childhood mortality and women that die through pregnancy and different things and nutrition. And how do you make sure, you know, getting vitamins to pregnant mothers sooner around the world? I think it's like $1.50 or $2 per woman will significantly improve the outcomes of childbirth and also how much nutrition the child needs at birth. And then where are they getting their nutrients when they're born? In the first 2 years, it makes significant outcome to their intelligence, to their survivability in early childhood, and also their economic output when they get older, and where their IQs end up. And,
Sure.
And they quantify all of it. It's fascinating because this really relates to business too, because, you know, like for us, we come up with these ideas and we're like, well, let's try this and do that. And then we try to measure and monitor, but how effective are we using our dollars and what is the benefit? Right.
Right.
So, you know, it got me thinking about our foundation, and I think we're donating a lot of money to a lot of great causes. But are we? And I'll speak to the opioid crisis and the street problem. Like we donate a lot of money in that area, but it's really the federal and provincial governments that need to be fixing it. Like we're basically throwing it into a well because the structural stuff isn't there. You know what I mean? So we feel like we're doing something, but we're actually not making it being a difference.
Well, and as much as I want to not say don't put your money into these things, I mean,
No,
if you
they need
really,
it.
if you seriously aren't seeing any results,
Yeah.
like it's only getting worse, and you see the mismanagement of our tax dollars that are supposed to be solving that problem, then you're kind of taking it on yourself.
Well, and I think
is that a reasonable thing for you to do?
Well, I think the problem is too big. Like, so the money that we're donating, and under pretty much any terms is sizable, considering we're basically donating 2 to 3% of our revenue to charitable causes. So it's adds up. Like it's $100,000 to $150,000 a year that we or one organization is donating. And we're a business for profit, so we're also trying to run a business, but we're happy to do it, and we're happy that we have organizations that we work with. But could that money be used better to have better outcomes in our community and more immediate? So the return on that, like the ROI on that dollar that we give to these organizations, might produce a $2 or $3 return versus doing a $15 to $20 to $30 to $50 return.
Right.
And brings me to, what I think we'll end up doing is dealing with, childhood hunger, like school lunches, school breakfast, school meals, so that people can have the nutrition to learn. And also tie that into our urban agriculture projects, which we also do with Fed Urban Agriculture, where we're growing food and we're donating some of that food. We're selling the food, but we're also doing education with nutrition. So I think I just blew up this.
Kaylin just blew up the podcast studio.
It's only water, so I think it'll be okay.
We're good.
But anyway, people on the video will see what happened, but people listening will be like, what are they talking about? But it just gets me to the point of like, that's what's got me fired up today, is about how can we do better and be more effective. So we may not be able to do the Peninsula Stream Maintenance Project, which is another good cause. That was something that we've done. End of life care is something that I care about tremendously. So we'll still be doing some of that stuff too. But what if we make sure that we bring stability to kids' diets and nutrition in our community? I mean, there's people, especially as the economy goes up and down, and you look at Indigenous populations, and a lot of them aren't going to school hungry. And how can they learn? How can they develop? How can they grow? And how can they also contribute, to their families, but also the community as a whole?
And how can you grow up in a system that fails you, believing in the system?
Yeah.
Right. And so you can never go wrong investing in children, whether they're your own or
100%
or the world's children.
100%.
Because in the great words of Whitney Houston, they are our future.
Yeah. Well, and you look at that is one of the things. Obviously, you think we in the Western world think, oh, well, we're rich and we've got all this stuff, and we do, and we have an abundance, but we don't manage that well. And there's a huge ton of the population that falls through the cracks. I mean, my parents were low to middle income when I was growing up, and I remember being hungry. And it wasn't maybe or even the knowledge of it. Like, how do I get nutritious food? Because you need those calories to drive your attendance in class and paying attention and learning and all those things. Like, I think it's a good. So I'm going to look in that thing, but it's got me inspired to basically figure out how to use the money better. But then it ties into business, because it's like, how are we doing our programs that we're trying to do, our employee incentive program, or living wages for our staff, and our training procedures, and we have a HR manager, and what is the benefit? We're doing these things that make us feel good because we think we're doing the right things. It's we have an HR person, check. We're paying, close to living wage, or, the whole package is a living wage, check. We get benefits, check. We're training, check. But what investment in that, like, what is it producing? Like, is it helping our business grow? Because we can't do any of the charity stuff. We can't do any of our community work if we don't sell good product, and if our business doesn't make money.
Right.
And it brought me to the reason why it's on my top of mind now is because we've made a decision to close our Nanaimo store. So,
that's a big decision.
It's a big decision because it's 20% of our stores. And
you got, my math isn't good, but that means you got five stores.
Yeah, we've got 5 stores.
Okay.
So, and we've been up there since we opened in COVID. We're in an area that is underserved. It's a lower income area. It's not kind of our demographic. We're on the higher value end. We think we value for money, but if somebody's going to choose between, a $6 sandwich or $11.50 cheeseburger, economically, they probably have to do the $6 sandwich, right? So it's hard to make money in our time. We've been basically losing $10,000 a month in that store for, on average, probably 3 of the years. Like, there's some months where we've made money, and
sustainable. And
it's
you
not sustainable.
You don't see it improving in a time frame that's acceptable.
No, well, I would think. I mean, there's things that we tried to do, and we threw everything at it. There's some things that we didn't do. I think we failed the store, and truthfully, I think as a leader, I have to look at it and go, like, this isn't, like, partially it's where we're located, partially, it's our business model that maybe isn't being embraced by that community. And I think it's fundamentally the way the community is designed, and the lack of a center core. And there isn't a lot of community up there. I'm sure there's pockets, and I don't want to speak ill of Nanaimo, but for us, I was really proud of us going in that area because I knew it was underdeveloped. And you look at these brands like Starbucks and Moxie's and all these places that just go Brown Social, that go to these areas that are slam dunks. Oh yeah, there's traffic. Mm-hmm. Everybody's white and woke and all this stuff, and they're spending money, and they're doing all this stuff, so it's going to be a success, and it ends up being a success. And then I was thinking, I had a friend of mine show up in Nanaimo, and I had lunch with her and her husband, and they both were like commending us for being in that location because they knew it was a lower income area. we're paying. I mean, the jobs that we're offering were higher. I mean, everybody there was making, after tips, they're making $25 an hour.
Well, that's great for your employees, but that doesn't speak to your demographic.
No, well, then
right?
people
that aren't making that, they're still making $16 an hour,
Yeah.
maybe, and are having a hard time paying rent, let alone going out for a burger.
Totally. So it's it's a little pretentious on one aspect, but it's kind of I was proud because I'm like, you know what, it's really easy to go to North Nanaimo, for example, where arguably a lot of the money is there, and go, oh yeah, look at us, we're doing great. But okay, why can't we be in a place where people need higher paying jobs, higher value company proposition? I guess I would think we fall into that category. But on the other hand of it, like, what am I doing to our overall brand? Not just our brand economically, but how do we do better how is it benefiting anybody if we're losing, $150,000 a year being open there?
It's not benefiting anyone.
No. And, is that area going to be gentrified in the next 5 or 6, 7 years? Great. Yeah, probably. But
can you wait that long?
I guess the answer is no.
Yeah, no. The answer is no, because you're doing this, right?
Well, we're doing it. We've made the decision to close it.
Okay.
I know you've got experience in closing stores.
I've closed more than I've opened, but I know that my math isn't that good, so it just feels like I've.
So you're in the business of closing businesses.
That's me, baby.
Arguably,
closing
you can't have closed more than you've opened because you still have stores open.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I've
opened
and closed more stores than I can remember.
Yes.
That may be what.
Well, and for me, we were involved as investors and sort of managing partners in the guild, which was not a successful operation. We lost our shirts. So we've closed that.
Yeah. Did you close it or did you sell?
We sold, but
okay.
we sold
but
because
then
we were
it
losing
ended
our
up
shirt.
closing.
They ended
right?
up closing anyways. So
they didn't sell, so they took a bath.
We took the bigger bath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we sold for peanuts just to try to recover some money for the vendors, and then we covered most of the losses of that ourselves.
And whoever bought it then was in.
Yeah,
for
they had
it
a clean
not
slate.
As much,
yeah, they weren't in for as much, and I guess the writing was in the wall. Anyway, but that was my one and only experience in shutting down a business. I've sold businesses in the past.
Well, there's a few ways to get out of businesses, isn't there? You can just walk away. You can sell.
Yeah.
You can. How else can you do it? You can.
I guess you can give it away.
You give it to someone else.
Yeah, you can give it to your employees.
Yeah.
Right.
Did Prima Strada do something like that? Did they sell?
They sold to one of their employees in Cobble Hill.
Okay.
So
it wasn't to all their employees. It was just
it was one in particular. Okay. They rebranded it. And
oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not. Oh, okay. It's not a Prima Strada.
It's not a Prima Strada, so
okay.
It wasn't like they sold it as franchise. She indicated that she wanted to take it on, and again, it's one of those things where your expectations. I'm sure Prima Strada, like Kristen from Prima Strada, probably was thinking, it was a good market, it would make it work, and that idea, like you think, even I think about it. Big Wheel, I'm like, oh, our brand's so cool and people love it and we have so many fans. But you go to a different community where they don't get what we're doing, or they're not aligned with what we're doing or any of that, then it's a different world. So now you actually have to focus on the fundamentals. Like, okay, what are we doing sales wise? How much of our expenses? What are we paying in rent? Do we have a good landlord partner? And there's just a lot of no's when it came to that community. Like, so then it's like, are we forcing something on a community that doesn't want it?
I remember hearing about Starbucks and their expansion years ago when they were going into neighborhoods that had never had a coffee shop with a couch in it. And it would have been pretentious and they would be gentrifying certain communities if they just went in with their model.
Yeah.
But they didn't. What they did was they looked at the community that they were going to and what would serve them best, and they built it for that community. I mean, within reason, right?
That is such a good, like, you're just saying that, and I'm just like, wow, that's so smart.
Right. Yeah. And then there was
I mean, not to say Starbucks is the model, but that idea
right is
a good model.
And then Caleb Byers, remember Caleb?
I love Caleb.
Yeah,
Caleb.
he had a really great idea that was along those lines. He wanted to have cafes all over town, and I forget what he was going to call them, like the neighborhood, or and then it was going to be like the James Bay Cafe, the Fairfield Cafe.
Well,
he had a clever name for it, though.
They did it. They opened that that one in Fernwood, and it was based on the Fernwood Library or something. It was almost like a library theme.
Okay.
And I'm totally butchering it, but that was one of their first. So he had, and unfortunately Caleb passed this summer.
Year, yeah.
And what a loss to the community that is and was. And his wife Henley is amazing, and their children, and it was a major loss. He was incredible talent, and Henley, his wife, is an amazing talent as well. But that idea
building for the community, as opposed to trying to fit yourself into a different community, and then realizing that, well, maybe this isn't going to work, and you have to close. You feel like you never served the community, or that the community didn't get what you were trying to do. But if you turn that around and look at it from the other way, like, how can I fit into this community from the get-go?
Where, Sam? We've been friends a long time. We've been on this podcast for 4 or 5 years. And you're now just telling me this?
I'm just telling you now.
I could have just totally redone our whole model and not closed our Nanaimo store.
Is it too late?
Well, technically we're still open. We don't close till Friday, but we have sold the space.
Yes.
So
okay.
To try to recover some money.
You're getting out of this one by selling. You're not just walking away.
No, and I think that's that also was an inducement to do it. So we quietly put that location for sale.
Through what channels did you use?
We basically just called a realtor who specializes in selling businesses. So and we had another offer, I guess probably about a year ago, and I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to give up on it. And what ended up turning the page for us is we had a food trailer that we were moving to North Nanaimo. We had a location picked. There was private land. We had the whole thing set up. There was another food trailer on the property. And it was a big mall that was is rejuvenating. So there's big parts of it that are closed, other parts that are open. And it was a perfect spot for us. We thought it would help build our business in Nanaimo, having a North Nanaimo. And Vancouver Island Health Authority basically just wouldn't let us do it.
Well, if I wasn't afraid of them, I'd tell them to go.
Well, I don't want to say, and I went all the way as high as I could, and I explained this is exactly what we were doing in Victoria with the exact same food truck. We had a contingency. It all came down to our gray water disposal. So we're on private land. There's a system we could have brought the gray water to easily. We had this aftermarket tank that would sit underneath, and it's on wheels. There'd be very little spillage of the gray water anywhere. And we're talking about just dirty dishwater.
Yeah.
And
we're not talking.
No, and we had a grease trap that was separate from a grease trap thing. So this was gray water that's already ran through a grease trap. So environmentally, there is zero, and it's a hardscape. So it's actually concrete that has drains in it. So any spill could easily just go down the drain, and there's no impact to soil. There's nothing. And there was another food trailer on the exact same spot that was doing it in 5-gallon buckets that is arguably
much
more risky.
Much more
but
risky.
They said they are grandfathered. And then I was like, well, show me under what bylaw are they grandfathered? Like, you can't saying they're grandfathered. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
what does that mean to you, except you can't do it, but they can?
Yeah, like it doesn't,
that's
like, show me what basis they're being. But
right.
So we pushed back, and I really was upset. Like, I actually lost, I think, a few years of my life over that, because I knew the impact. If us not being able to do it, I knew I would not be able to keep the South Nanaimo store going.
Right.
That was the one leg that if we could develop there, perhaps open a North Nanaimo store, we can use the South Nanaimo store for commissary kitchen, share staff, share management. The efficiency just adds up. Absolutely. And I told them that too. And the worst part about it for me is that the Loaves and Fishes and the Wisteria Food Bank and the charities that benefit from us being there, they potentially would lose the funding that we've been providing for them. Right. So it's not just about me and my business and what I think is profit or whatever, or the staff. It's in particular the staff too. We had 5 or 6 people that have been with us since the beginning, which is unusual in a fast food joint. So our staff were amazing too. So the implications were way bigger than just whether we're spilling a little bit. And this is where it just makes me so angry.
It's so
like it's so unreasonable.
It is.
Like we demonstrated that, and these are commercially viable solutions that are maybe not like perfect. They just wanted us to do something that was impossible.
And they're going to say that they're not in the business of making it hard for you to do business, but
that's absolutely
100% are.
True. And the thing about it is it's different, and even though it's Vancouver Island Health, the rules are applied differently depending on what office is applying them.
Oh, and what officer is applying them as well.
Exactly. And
100%.
Nanaimo was notoriously harder to deal with, not only just from the VHA scent, but like the city too, was a little bit more difficult.
Is that because all the newbies have to go start in Nanaimo and then they retire in Victoria or something?
I don't know, because I don't know that it's a market that is friendly as far as different things. And, I don't want to get into the politics of it, because I'm sure Nanaimo is a fantastic community for the people that live there. And, it's a beautiful city from the standpoint of where it is in the world. Like, it's looking at this beautiful ocean.
And I'm sure VHA saves some lives. But come on.
I mean, there's reasonable restrictions and non-reasonable. And in my mind, what they did to us was completely unreasonable. And then now I'm dealing with the ramifications of it. But it's easy to blame them. And I think as a business person, it's way more important to look at, okay, what did we do? What did I do as a leader to allow this to have happened and not made it work? And there's things that we could have done better to support our team up there, the product up there, our training, our lead up to promoting who we are and all the marketing thing. And we just got into this negative loop. And we basically talked ourselves into where we were, because we just kept complaining about our lack of sales, and we kept doing things that weren't working. And, we're basically just believed our own message that it wasn't working up there. So that probably contributed a little bit of it. And it could be just straight structural, that it was never going to work in that location too. But I don't like not knowing, and I also don't like closing something when I feel like there's areas that we didn't try hard enough or didn't do correctly. And I had a operations manager who's been with us, I think 6 months or something, and she's fantastic. And she basically called us out, and she used great terms like I think we failed the store. If this deal doesn't go through, I'd like to give it a go. And that's still, if the deal didn't go through, we still would have opened, and we still would have been there, and we still would have been trying. Because we saw another year in our lease, and I was like, I'm committed to trying to turn this around, despite what could have been better judgment. But she was right, and all of us, me and my partners, were like looking. Well, one of them wasn't. She's like, no, Nanaimo's not good. But I was like, we did fail them. We could have done a better job. So, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Like, what, in your experience, because you've closed, like you said, more than you've opened, in particular the Hillside, not the Hillside, the
Hudson?
The Hudson.
Yeah,
the one on Fisgard. Is that, like, talk to me a little bit about your thoughts around that, and what, I know that, there's a bit of a cantankerous relationship with
I think, even contemplating closing one of your businesses, there's got to be a lot leading up to even you thinking about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had lots leading up to your Nanaimo store, right? I could see over the course of this last year how you're working towards that decision.
Yeah.
And the same thing, no matter where you are. My deal at the Hudson was years of, issues with neighbors, issues with the landlord. Those I would deal with on a daily basis, and I was getting through them. But eventually, they wear on you. They wear on you. They wear you down, and they make your job a little bit more taxing than it needs to. And then when something else comes up and layers upon that, it makes you wonder what you're doing
Yeah.
in that location.
Yeah,
And COVID for me was a real trigger for the downtown location
Yeah.
at the Hudson.
Yeah,
And-
it's killed lunch trade.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
yeah.
But before we could count on Monday to Friday were our busiest days, you can count on the coffee break and the lunch break. And then it was like, well, okay, well, Mondays and Fridays are done
Yeah.
because everyone's still being encouraged to stay home.
Yeah.
And so the business downtown is improving, I guess, right now. But at the time when I closed, I couldn't see it getting to where I needed it to be again.
Like pre-COVID levels.
Pre-COVID levels.
Like
I
if it was
just
operational pre-COVID, you probably would have stayed. So
I
COVID
would.
was a backbreaker for you.
Absolutely. That and my lease was coming up.
Yeah.
So I was just finishing up my 10-year lease. I had 2 more 5-year options that I could have gone with.
Yeah.
But I decided because of my relationship with the landlord
Yeah.
and the state of downtown and the cost of it, I just pulled the plug.
Yeah.
I did not renew for the next 5-year term. And what that meant for me was I didn't get anything because I didn't sell.
Yeah.
I had to get whatever assets out of there that I could.
Yeah.
And my landlord
There's a
blamed
different
me.
understanding of what was yours and what was his.
Exactly. The person who took over my spot actually called my landlord. This is hilarious. Called my landlord because he wanted me to leave everything. The guy who was going to take over my spot.
Yeah, of course he did.
Of course, he wanted me to leave the bars and
Yeah.
the tables, and I stripped it bare.
Yeah.
And I cleaned it amazingly well, I got to say. But he complained to the landlord. He said, Sam's taking the toilets out of the bathrooms. And I certainly was not. So my landlord
exactly.
all of a sudden is like all
Freaking
over
out.
me, freaking me out. Anyway.
Yeah, I would have bet money that you wouldn't have done that.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
it's
and I didn't.
Yeah.
However,
But
just
that's an example of taking everything but
everything
kitchen
but
sink.
the kitchen sink. Yeah. But I got blamed for taking the kitchen sink anyway. And that's an example of just like ending your lease and walking away.
Yeah.
And I don't regret not being there.
Yeah.
But I certainly miscalculated what the cash flow was doing to my business.
Right.
My overall business.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at the expenses it was
Yeah.
costing me, all the employees I was keeping,
Yeah.
the rent that I was spending.
But not
and-
looking at the top line of the dollars.
but
that
not
you were,
looking at what
yeah.
was coming in. I was just
Yeah.
thinking, well, if I cancel out all the expenses, it won't matter about the top line.
Yeah.
Because I don't need it to pay all my stuff. But
Yeah. It was a big contributor.
It was a big contributor. And I learned a lesson there
Yeah.
for sure. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it. either.
Yeah, you're
I
so
would just
happy
go
with the
into
decision.
it.
You would have just
Yeah,
done it
I've
differently.
just gone into it knowing more
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being prepared for it.
Yeah.
Because there were things I could have done to make
Yeah.
that easier for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know what those are.
Could
off the
you?
top of my
Okay,
head, but-
this is a good. I think this is a good discussion because I think, instinct is like I got to get out of this. I don't like my relationship with my landlord. And I had a similar relationship with our landlord in Nanaimo too. Like there was many times, even when we were starting, that I should have just said no, because if you don't have a good landlord partner, it's really hard to feel good about your business. And when things go wrong, like COVID or these, COVID's a bad example because it's like once in a century kind of thing. But when things aren't going well, you need your landlord to sort of help you and step up in order for you to get through these hard times in business. I mean, our margins are thin and it's tough and all that kind of stuff. But would you, I think about the options. So we go through the options. One, you did the one where you just close. Your lease is coming up. You don't want any more responsibility. You just close and you strip. Could you have renewed the lease? Well, I know you could have. You could have renewed it for 5 years and sold that location, just like what we did in Nanaimo.
Yeah.
Like it's not a Big Wheel Burger anymore. It won't be a Big Wheel Burger anymore. It'll be Burger Factory, and it'll providing burgers to that community will be their problem.
Kaylin, we've been friends for years, and now you're just telling me this right now on this podcast? Damn it.
That's a theme. Talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Keep information circulating.
Yeah.
Discuss and debate.
If I that is another kind of risk.
We were
though.
doing this podcast while
Right?
you were doing that too, by the way.
I know. But it was that felt like it was going to be a risk as well because I have I have zero experience trying to sell my business.
Yeah.
And
But it's not even
and-
selling your business. It's basically selling your location as a coffee shop.
but that's
You're not
still
getting the name,
trying
you're
to
not
sell.
getting anything.
And
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that world, or
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm starting
Yeah.
to learn a little bit about that right
Yeah.
now. But at the time, I knew nothing about that.
Yeah.
I would have thought that would be not a great choice, because I'd be taking the risk of being hung out for 5 more years on a lease that I didn't want. And who's going to want to buy a huge, expensive coffee shop right downtown? It's like, well, there's actually quite a few people that would.
Yeah.
And that's what I know now that
Yeah.
I didn't know before.
Yeah.
I didn't value my brand or my
Yeah.
location or what I was doing
Yeah.
as much as other people were looking at it going, hey, I would have bought that.
Well, and that's
No.
the beauty of the industry we're in. And this is the thing, because we were dealing with the landlord of Vancouver because we're looking to expand to Vancouver. And they didn't see the value of a restaurant being in there. But guess what? Just like we had a dream, there's 100,000 people behind us that have a similar dream of having their coffee shop, working for themselves, and all that kind of stuff. And having that infrastructure there and having it set up and having a turnkey business has a lot of value.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
I
have
guess
to be
it's just
attached
the
to your
assets
brand.
at that point, right?
Well, it's assets, but it's location, it's your leaseholds, it's things that are already done. So when you look at this, you know, and I think that's a very good lesson for people that have multi-stores or a store where they've invested in the landlord's building. A lot of things you can't take out once it's secured. So every lease is a little different.
Yep.
So you clearly
I clearly didn't
Anything that
bolt
wasn't
anything to
bolted.
the ground.
But part of it is if you leave it how you found it, it's the other thing too, right? Like it's not your responsibility to provide leaseholds for their new tenant. It's an asset for them, and the landlords want that. And a lot of times they build their lease to have that happen. But you built it, you paid for it. I mean, I'm sure it cost, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get your store the way it was.
Yeah.
And that's worth something to sell, because you don't need to sell, you know, 2% jazz. You
Right.
need to sell that location as a tenant improved location. So you're not going to get dollar for dollar. Say you put in 300, 400 grand, you won't probably get 300 or 400 grand.
Yeah, but you're not going to walk away with nothing either.
No, you're gonna maybe get 200K. But if somebody wants to open a coffee shop, you already have trade.
Yeah.
So that's worth something, right? You've got a viable business that's there. You know, arguably, if you just close, somebody's going to walk in and set up a coffee shop, and they're going to benefit from what you've done over the last 5 years there, for example.
Yeah.
But you didn't get the money for it, right? So
Right.
not to slam me over the head, but the risk, and because but you're not the only, like, listen, my team was saying, well, what's the plan? Are we going to renew our lease? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to renew our lease, because that, even though I didn't want to be in that location, if we were still there a year from now, I would have renewed the lease, because that's a value to somebody else. Then I would have sold that location. I'd say, here, we got a tenant improvement. So the place that's going in that bought it is another burger joint. So they've got the equipment, they've got this stuff, and we sold it.
And that you still had one more year on your lease?
We had one more year in the lease.
Okay, so did that have what kind of value did that have for the
it's the
person buying
options.
it?
It's the options. So
No,
there's
but in terms of the purchase price, like what?
well,
they
there's
paid
no,
you,
like, you
does
don't
that
break
have
it out
value?
that way. There's value for sure, because we already have a lease. So in our case, we assign the lease to the new owner.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the landlord has to approve it, but they can't unreasonably withhold their approval. So if it's like covenants, like, you can't, they're not going to, you know, if the Hells Angels were going to take it over, they'd probably be like, oh, wait a minute, these guys.
Know what they're doing, and
No,
they're
yeah,
going to pay their rent every
Yeah,
month, and
exactly.
they're good. They're good for another 50 years.
Send like horses' heads to the owner's bed or whatever.
Wow.
And I'm talking about the Hells Angels.
Yes.
No disrespect to the Hells Angels, by the way. Don't come at me.
I'm sure they love Big Wheel burgers.
Yeah, I'm positive. So anyway, my point is that the landlord has to approve it. So, but there's value in it, because say you didn't have any options. So once you don't have any options, and once your lease is approaching, somebody who's going to buy it will just wait to see what you do. Like, if you just close like you, then I've got this location that I don't have to pay for. And that goes back to original when we opened Zambri's. We made an offer on a pizza joint in behind London Drugs, and we were going to buy their spot, basically. So there's nothing that they had there that was really useful to us as far as what we were going to use, but it's just a spot. And we did that up in Courtenay because we're opening a new location in Courtenay, and we bought this person out of their lease effectively, and it was $50K, but they had options, and there's some value. They had some stuff like they've got their hood, there's bathrooms already there, things like that. So there was some value. And they were having it for sale. I could have just said, okay, well, we'll just wait till but there's risk there because somebody else may jump on it, or, the landlord may not rent it to me or whatever. So, there's value in what they did. Like, so in this case, I think it was like 50,000 or something like that. They ended up taking 50,000 when they probably would have just closed for nothing and just taken their equipment, and maybe they would have sold some of their equipment for, pennies on the dollar or whatever and gotten some money back, but they wouldn't have probably got 50,000. And we bought our Langford location too off a lovely lady who'd been there forever. And
was that
Island Subs, but it was formerly Quiznos, and she had the Quiznos. And for me, so how somebody, and this is the other side, somebody's going to look to get a location. So if I'm starting a location from scratch, so this is for everybody out there, if you're going to open a location in a mall in, Terrace, BC or Minnesota or wherever, that if it's a blank shell, you're going to be looking at $400,000 to $600,000 to make
that you'll never see again.
Well, that's going to be forget about whether you're going to see it again or not. Ideally, you are, because you're going to either sell it at some point, which you'll get some of the money back or most of the money back, or you're going to open a chain and sell that, or you're just going to make a bunch of money in that location because it's successful. So it's not about worrying about that. It's worrying about, how do I open a business for the least amount of money where I can get the most amount of benefit.
Right.
So Island Sub's a prime example. It's an awesome corner in a busy mall. The traffic's huge. It's going to be a good location for us. I knew that. So I could just not have paid her any money and waited till she decided to close, but then I might not have got the location because somebody else might have beat me to it, or somebody else might have paid her something,
right,
and she would have taken that, and then I would have been shut of that location. Or I could say, well, there's another location over there, but it's a shell, and I have to invest $600,000. So it's the opportunity cost of one decision versus another decision. So we're looking at other locations. We're looking at new builds, and we're like, okay, well, that's going to cost us $600,000. This one might cost us $300,000. We could do this spot for $200,000. Everything's going to cost you some money.
Yeah.
So for us to get open for the cost that we paid to buy the location, because honestly, in real terms, the location isn't worth anything, really. You know what I mean? Like the value of the goods you're buying isn't worth much.
Right.
Right. Even if it's fully equipped, it's, probably 20 cents on the dollar for the equipment. You're going to change it because it's not your style and look. So you have to invest that money anyways. Mm-hmm. So we probably spent total to open that store probably around $400 to $450. But if we started from scratch, it would have been $600 to $650.
Yeah,
so that saves us
a big difference.
Yeah. And that is the opportunity cost. And that's the value you have in selling versus just closing. Is somebody sees the value there because they're planning on doing a coffee shop, for example, or they're planning, like these people are planning to open a burger joint, and they've got this perfectly placed burger joint that it was already a burger joint. So people are going to just be coming there and see Burger Factory, not Big Wheel, and go, okay, well, I guess I get a burger here now. So they're going to inherit our trade. Yeah. So it's only fair that they compensated us for doing that.
Yeah, because you set them up.
Yeah, set them up.
Whatever success you're going to have.
And I wish them well, and I'm glad that they'll be creating some jobs in that neighborhood, and all that is good. But I'm also glad that, of the $1 million we invested in that location, plus that we're going to get some of that money back, which we then can use to open Courtenay, which arguably might be a better market for us. We're optimistic about how it's going to go. So that allows us to make that shift. So we're basically closing an IMO and we're opening Courtenay, and we're using some of those funds to do that, which help us. So as a business, it's a necessity for survival, but also our overall plan and strategy of making, successful restaurants that can support the communities that we're in, but also being a community that gets us, right? But, when you're touching on that point about, modifying your brand to suit the community you're in. I think that is such, like, I'm gonna write that down because it's so valuable. Like, stop thinking that your brand is perfect for everybody,
Right.
and start thinking, well, how can I adjust my brand? Like, we should have just adjusted our brand, even though it's different. We could make it a community brand, an Nanaimo community brand, where maybe the burgers were a bit smaller and the price point was a little bit less, and maybe we offered something else other than what we offered in Victoria.
Yeah,
for
it
our
doesn't have
clients
to
here.
be exactly the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, which
same,
is
same ideals.
Yeah.
Same values.
yeah, and it could be
different-
90% the same, or 85% the same, but it suits that community better. Which I think, in retrospect, the businesses need to be a bit more adaptable to where they're going, especially now in this world. Because information's out there. People can have access to information. People could see what people are doing in South Dakota or Florida or Berlin or anything, and come up with cool, unique ideas that make it fresh and compelling for the customer's standpoint. So why not give it to them? Why not be creative? Why lock yourself in a box?
Right.
And yeah, it didn't occur to me. And we made choices up there because our prices were a bit different for a while, and because we were sensitive, we had specials up there that we didn't have here. We had combos that we didn't have down here, and then a few years ago we made a decision just to unify it because that wasn't working either. You know what I mean?
Was that to try to cater to your customers' needs, or was it because you were isolated up there and had the ability to do whatever?
Well, a little bit of both.
Right?
Like, we could separate our pricing. We could do things a little different up there because of geographically we were different. Yeah. The market was different there too, so we needed to show some more value. And when you look at value, everybody looks at value differently. A lot of people will say, "Oh, this burger is $11.50," where McDonald's is $7.50, $8. But if you look at what you're buying, like, so you're buying a 2-ounce burger versus a 5-ounce burger. You're buying, it's still 1,000 calories.
A beef burger
Yeah.
rather than whatever
beef
burger.
and sawdust or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, not to disparage it, but the
I
calories
love
the calories are about the same, but the nutrition is different because you're basically getting a bunch of, like, sugar, that is making up the calorie content versus, like, sort of real food. 5 ounces versus 2 ounces is a significant difference in caloric intake.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the value for us, and we can make that argument all day long, but if somebody is just price sensitive and don't really care about the nutrition, or, like, nutrition in burgers is kind of funny, but it's, what the point is.
There is nutrition in
There's
burgers,
100%
for sure.
nutrition. Well, and if you're eating real food or processed food or things like that. So I think that kind of ties into the value proposition there, but thinking about it differently. Like, I don't know that I ever thought, I always was, because we did it, but maybe not in the way that Nanaimo needed us to do it.
And
That's a very good lesson.
And maybe also it's not necessarily about product and price. Maybe it's about the environment and
The store was beautiful. That was one of our best stores on a corner, big bright windows. It was so good.
But maybe people up there wanted something a little bit darker, a little bit more
Yes.
moody, and,
Dark.
Well, not dark,
No,
dark, but
dark.
maybe they
Like
wanted
Pulp Fiction, dark.
Yeah, so dark. Baby. No, but there's other ways to change your business, not just product and pricing, but maybe it could have been like the art on the walls, or it could be anything that make it fit more into a neighborhood. It makes me think of not your place in Nanaimo, doesn't make me, but this conversation makes me think of a fancy restaurant that opened up it's right downtown East Vancouver, and it was in a sensitive time. It was before COVID, and the downtown east side was becoming outrageous, as everyone knows it is now. And this really fancy restaurant opened up, and it was the only thing on the block that didn't have boards on the windows.
Yeah.
And they got people protesting out in front of it, and it wasn't the right fit for the neighborhood. It just wasn't.
But they tried something outside the box.
But they tried something outside the box, and I don't know if it's still there or not.
Yeah.
Probably not. But.
Well, I guess that's a prime example of forcing your idea on a community. Like, there's many reasons why businesses won't work.
Well, it's a
right?
whole if you build it, they will come fallacy. It's like,
Well-
that's not necessarily true. If you build it, they might not come.
Well, and when we're here in Victoria, I think we've got a good brand. We've got a semi-cult following. Our businesses do well here. And then we're thinking, oh, well, we're just going to open one in Nanaimo. It doesn't really matter where we open it. Store is nice. It's brand new. We spent $600,000 building it. They're going to just come.
But
And
the
guess
culture is
what?
different, right?
The culture's different. The people are different. Their view on what you're doing and what business they connect with is different.
Well, the average Victorian is probably driven past and seen and would go, hey, that's a Big Wheel burger. Whereas
Yeah.
someone in Nanaimo may not have ever even heard the name Big Wheel.
No.
Right? I mean, why
But
would they if
this
there
is a
isn't
part
one
of
up there?
being, there's this concept of ethnocentric where, you think your people are the people that everybody should be emulating. And I guess Americans have a bit of a perception from the world looking in that they're ethnocentric, where they just think the world revolves around America and everything that they do is right and everybody that is doing other things is wrong.
What's the stat? Like only 30% of Americans have passports?
Yeah. Right. Or they're in Germany and expecting Germans to speak English and complaining, why don't they speak English? Well, guess what? That's not the point. Why don't people get Big Wheel Burger? Why don't people get 2% Jazz? Like, who knows the answer to that question? But when they're telling you with their dollars, you should be listening. When they're not coming in and it's not working, there's something different.
Yeah.
That's a clue. And sometimes, well, for us, it was too late because we were already there. But could we have just lowered our price point? Because we still might have lost $10,000 a month, but we could have built the business from that.
Then slowly.
slowly increased and got there, and then people got caught up with what we were doing, and then you actually change the hearts and minds of that community. Right. And as the community gentrifies and aligns more with, where you need to be price-wise, you can be there. That probably would have been a better strategy. And we tried doing that in a little way, but we just didn't do it in the right way because probably a little bit of arrogance, probably a little bit of stubbornness, and also not wanting to change who we are to fit the community. But guess what? The community told us, you guys aren't a fit.
Yeah.
Get out. And that's basically what's happened, but we could use that as, it's definitely a learning experience, but we're not going with our tails tucked between our legs. We're still determined. Our brand is still strong. The other stores offset those losses. So it's not like, we're, selling anything or risking going out of business, continuing. But
right.
why when we can, move to a market that is a bit more receptive, that fits more of what we want to do. But I do think there's a lot to learn in the fact that you need to be or could be prepared to change certain things to suit the market. I think it's wise.
Yeah. When you were figuring out if you were going to close this store, did you think about the cash flow and the influence on that? And if you did, how did you think about it? Is there a formula that you used or a guiding principle of how that works? Unlike what I did, where I just gave the shit away.
Well,
and I didn't think about that.
Well, I think it really comes down to your financials. So making sure that your financials are accurate so that each store, say you're multi-store, even if you're in one store, make sure that you have a really good bookkeeper, that your profit and loss statement and your balance sheet are done right. Yeah. So you can actually know point in time how much money you're making. Because I think there's a number of different ways to look at it. There's contribution, which is basically how much money from that sale is going to cover my expenses. Right. So you look at your gross profit and, adjusting your gross profit so that more money is going to pay your bills than not. So then whatever's above is kind of what your profit is or your free cash flow, right? That is also contributing to other things that you're doing, like your other businesses and whatever. So my guess is that business was probably producing positive cash flow. And you were maybe focused on the expense portion of it, so you're like, okay, I've got 10 staff, my labor's $8,000 a month. My, rent is $6-7 grand a month, $8 grand a month, $10 grand a month, whatever. So you got 20 grand in expenses. and you're like, oh, that would be really good not to have those 20 grand in expenses.
Yeah, think about all what I can do with that 20 grand.
Yeah.
But
you're making probably 25,000 in cash flow.
Right.
So there's a $5,000 that goes away too, plus the expense of closing it. So there's an expense there. So
For sure.
you've laid off your staff. You probably paid some severance to certain people, and or just had them work their notice out. But then you're probably spending 30 grand and just moving the stuff out of there, right? And then the cleanup costs. So maybe you're into 40K. So now, not only are you not getting the 5K positive cash flow, you're adding 40K of debt. You know, and cash flow is a beautiful thing because that actually pays. You know, you can run a business that is negative cash flow for quite some time and still survive because you're just stretching out your payables. You're not investing in new equipment. You're maybe depleting your inventory to raise cash. There's lots of different ways to, deal with like cash flow crunches, like season changes. So September goes into October, sales drop 10, 15% or something. So then you're like, okay, well, that's less cash flow is going in there. We're now maybe, if we were making some money, now we're probably just breaking even or maybe slightly losing. So that over the winter is going to chew some cash flow. So you're going to stretch your payables out a little bit. You'll deplete your inventory a little bit to raise that cash. And then you'll get into your busy season again. And all of a sudden that switches. So then you've got more cash.
Right.
But if you're not sort of managing where that cash goes, then you could end up in a situation where you're feeling it's the right decision to do something, but then not really quantifying the ramifications cash flow wise. Because soon as something like it's for example, if we had issues with staffing at our Cook Street location, and instead of banging our heads against the wall, kowtowing to staff's needs and whims, I just said, well, if they don't want to work and they keep not showing up, then fire them. And if we don't have enough staff, then we'll just close. And that's what we did. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that was it took about a month, but it completely shifted the entire attitude because our current staff were feeling supported, and then we were attracting the staff that we wanted and needed. And now we all of a sudden we're not saying yes to unreasonable requests. We were saying no. And guess what? We got the employees that were aligned with that. And then we're going. But when we close those stores, like, maybe we're looking at $5,000 or $6,000 or $4,000 to $6,000 of revenue. That's out of our bank account. Yeah. We still have bills, even though we're not paying, because your revenue is greater than your expenses.
Better be.
Right? It should be.
Yeah.
So when you stop, you may not have those expenses, but now you don't have that extra revenue, which is obviously subsidizing something or just going into your bank to pay your bills so that you can. A lot of times when we're operating in this business, you operate on such thin margins, you can't afford to close one day because you need that revenue to pay the bills the next day.
Yeah, they say that most businesses are a couple snow days away from closing.
Yeah, right? Well, and this is it, and that's why that's why we're doing what we're doing with the Bread and Butter Collective. That's why we keep having these real honest discussions about it, because if you don't think about this stuff or don't know about this stuff, you're going to end up in the same spot. Plus, we also need to create an environment that you can be successful. So you're charging what you need to charge without apologizing. It's that delicate balance, and you're paying your staff so they can afford to eat at your place, and also they can afford to show up and work. And I mean, it's an equilibrium and a balancing act that it's tough, man.
I just raised all my prices and not one comment.
No, well, of course not. And the thing about it is
great.
like,
It's so great that it didn't cause problems. Not so great that I had to raise prices, because that's never great, but great that I was able to do it with.
But the thing about it is, like, you have to make those decisions, because if you don't, then you're subsidizing your customers to eat at your place and drink at your place. Yeah. And that can't be right. I don't think of a customer, like, I don't feel good about going to your place thinking, oh, Sam is buying part of my coffee today, because he's losing 20 cents a cup, right? It's like, well, I'd rather pay 50 cents more knowing that you're not losing money, that I can be there a year from now or 2 years from now, or that you have the ability to control your destiny in the way that you want to, so that you're not making decisions to just shut down stores.
Oh, you are a good customer. You're not only a good owner, you're a good customer.
Well,
I love you.
I mean, part of the messaging in all this for me is like just being real. Like, everybody goes to work for organizations. And, you know, other than the government, I mean, you want the government to run their thing efficiently, but if you're working for a company that sells a product, you want that company to be profitable, because they're going to be able to afford to cover your raises and pay you benefits and give you a quality of life. This is what we're on this planet to do. We're not on the planet just to take all the money and go, you know, on our yacht in the Mediterranean, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Like, that's not what that's not the intent. The intent is to build a good community where people want to live and work and thrive. And so it's a balance between giving value, giving, you know, a good product, and also making a living so that you can support yourself.
High tide raises all ships.
Yes,
right?
This is it. This is why it's just, this is why I like reading books, you know, that are practical, that make sense, that are preaching, you know, that information. Like, we're all in this together. Let's act as a community and let's bring everybody up.
The practicality you were talking about with this book, and the fact that you were saying that you didn't take kind of extreme sides, he's like more in the middle, practical.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this guy, Eric Weinstein. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eric Weinstein. He's got a podcast. I don't know who he is. I just kind of randomly came across him.
Yeah.
And evidently he does lots of public speaking everywhere, and he's really quite famous, I guess. But he takes that middle road. He sees both sides of the story really clearly, and doesn't engage in the conversation on either side, but only engages in the middle, it feels like. And what a way more interesting conversation to be had in the middle, when you're not taking any sides, but you can see and understand both sides, understand that this person has this feeling, this person has this feeling, but you're going to argue it in the middle, and it's so much more interesting. And I think you'd like this guy.
Well, do you know why it's more interesting? Because I'm thinking, because I know based on the authors I read that are of that sort of ilk, and the way I kind of view things, it's about data. Like, what does the data tell you? Because if you're on either side of it, chances are you're looking either not at the data, you're just going with your feeling,
or it's skewed data.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's driving your decision making. Like, far right, far left viewpoints are not data based. They're emotion based, in my view. You're like anti-communism, you're anti, capitalism, but there's value in both ideologies in the middle, and based on data. Like, people that think that the world is going to hell in a handbasket and crime is up, and the data doesn't support any of it. The data doesn't support any of the narrative, and that includes the climate change narrative. The science does, but what the science is saying, what happens practically in terms of, life or death, or who's actually being impacted, is not true. Like, we've never been more safe in this day and age than in the last 100 years. The poor people are less poor than they've been in the last 100 years. We have longer, other than the blip in COVID, we have longer life expectancies than we've ever had. We're the poorest countries in the world are richer than they were 20, 30 years ago. All of those things are all true, but depending on what I want you to do for me, I'm going to tell you and say it's one thing or the other. And I think in business, and particularly looking at the data and looking at the facts and listening to what it's saying, not like, I thought Nanaimo would be a great market for Big Wheel Burger. I thought everybody in the world wanted Big Wheel Burger. They don't, right? And had I looked at the demographics a little bit more, I probably would have done things different. I might have been in North Nanaimo, because I would have probably been more successful in North Nanaimo. Right. Would it have still made it? I don't know, but I would have lost less money. I would have had more time and all that stuff. So I didn't listen. I didn't even look at the data. I just thought, my position is the right position, so everybody's going to agree with me when I go there. They don't.
Not necessarily.
No.
I mean, I think people will agree with you most of the time, because you're a pretty reasonable guy, but...
Well, and plus I just talk until they finally, okay, shut up, man.
Like, okay,
I agree.
I really do want a burger now.
Yeah.
I don't care if I have to drive to North Nanaimo.
I'm going to pay $11.50 for a cheeseburger.
And one of those delicious 2% jazz shakes.
Oh, those 2% jazz shakes are good. That's a really good partnership.
That's been great.
Yeah, and I love because the other thing could be partner with Island Pepper Company too.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of cool to just work with you and your business and know that some of our money is going to help support your business.
Yeah.
Our money is going to help support Island Pepperco business.
And some of my product is being sold in your place,
Yes.
generating money
Yeah.
for these charities.
Yes, 100%.
It's like I'm giving to charities.
100%. Yes, but this is the beauty, right? But
Yeah.
again, not everybody wants that or,
Yeah.
Aspires to do that or support that or sees the benefit of it. And I was arrogant enough to think that I could just drop a big wheel burger anywhere and people would love it. It's not the case.
Well, I thought the same thing on the Gorge. I thought,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the Gorge. I'm just going to, there's nothing there. This
Yeah.
beautiful neighborhood. I'm going to take it by storm.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, that's not the case.
Well, that's interesting because the Tim Hortons was up and I didn't. I wonder if that would. Well, if Tim Hortons can't make it on the Gorge, then
right.
that's the other thing. Like if Tim Hortons can't make it on the Gorge,
I've
is a
got
2%
more
jazz
determination. I got more grassroots.
well,
and-
we're stubborn.
yeah,
too.
well, way more stubborn.
Yeah. And I guess
I don't like
arrogant?
failing either. Well, maybe arrogance.
A little bit arrogant. I think.
I'm not. I don't think that I'm too good to fail. I
Yeah.
just don't want to ever fail.
No, and we like doing
You know?
stuff. Like we like trying things. Like I think of all the different incarnations that you've tried. It's inspiring. And some have worked, some haven't. Just like what we opened the show with about, closing more than we've opened. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And learning those lessons, and part of it is the journey and the path. Like everybody's attached to outcomes, and I think that is just a wrong way of looking at life. I think you need to be attached to what your day-to-day looks like and what you're contributing and how you're feeling in the moment as you're going through things. Because I think you'll actually make better decisions. Because if you're attached to, I want to make $1 million or whatever, well, you may never make $1 million. But you know what? You might make 300K, and 300K might be enough.
Yeah.
But through the whole time of trying to chase the million, you're probably missing a lot of those little nickels that would add up over time, right? But you're just chasing the big dollars. And I think, one of the things I've learned from poker is don't worry about the outcome. Like I get it in as an 80% favorite. I'm gonna lose 20% of the time, and I might lose 20% of the time every day for a month before it turns around. Doesn't mean I'm bad at poker. Doesn't mean you're a bad business person, but if you're stressed about it and you're crying about it, you're too attached to the outcome.
Right. And if you're looking at only the outcome, you're going into a poker tournament with 100 people and you're only looking at being number one, you're missing the whole focus because it's okay to be number two.
Yeah.
You're still a winner, really.
Well,
right?
if you're only just focused on number one, you're going to probably not get 10th a lot. You're probably not going to get.
Well, your chances of success in your mind have just dropped.
Well,
if you say, I want to be in the top 50, well, you've got a 50-50 shot of being successful.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right. And you're going to feel good about that because you've set your goals as realistic.
Yeah, manage your expectations.
Yeah, and the odd time you are going to come first. You know, and the odd time your ideas are going to work. But if you get too down, and it's really about that balance, and that's where the middle, just what we talked about, is if you're going to get too down, that can be perpetuating. Just like if you're a diver and you let go of your BCD, the air in your vest, you're just going to sink.
Yeah.
Right. And you're going to continue to sink, and it's going to take more air to bring you back up. Same in business, like your investment. If you pick a path for too long because you're just thinking, I'm just focused on this, and if I do this, everybody's going to do it.
That's a really good point.
But not listening to what the feedback's coming and not looking at the data and going, this might take a decade to work. Yeah. But I'm like, let me, because I'm just thinking of this success or, everybody likes it in Victoria. It's like, I'm not listening to the information that's being played back to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And then you make different decisions. And then it's less swingy too, because you're less attached to that big number.
I have such a big hill to climb once you realize what you've done.
And then the other thing is being realistic about your successes. Like sometimes it's not the home run, it's the base hits that really move you forward. And if you make less mistakes, that's going to be better too, because you can spend a lot of time chasing your tail in the mistakes. But if they're just smaller bites and smaller errors, and you're making those little hits, soon they'll add up to doubles and triples, and you'll add up, the runs will add up, and quit worrying about hitting that freaking home run.
Well, especially if you're not the 0.001% of players that can hit a home run
Yeah.
every single time they
Yeah.
get a bat. Like,
Exactly.
there's very few people that can do that.
Yeah.
But most people can get to first base.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need.
That's it.
I mean, it reminds me of my first date.
Whoa.
No, I'm just happy to get to first base.
Yeah,
man.
I'm just happy
I'm
to
just happy.
have someone return my phone call.
Right? Oh my God, that's still true today. I'm just
It
happy for
didn't
people
take
to
3
return
or
my
4
phone
days,
calls.
a week. Man, she hasn't called. Oh man.
I just went through that.
Oh.
not with a girl, but
Yeah. I'm like, aren't you married? What's going on?
no. I went through that, and it turns out you actually solved my problem. So
Oh yes.
inside joke.
Inside
Sorry.
joke.
Sorry.
Inside joke.
By
Yes,
a
I
digit.
did.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And I'm so happy that it all worked out. And
Yeah.
you're now dating again.
I know, right? Oh my God, that's gross.
Oh, well, this is a long one. I guess maybe we should wrap up
Oh yeah. Hey, look at that. An hour and 14 minutes on the clock.
on the clock.
That's a beautiful thing. Well, as much as I love having guests here, sometimes it's nice to get into a juicy conversation and just
Well, I think it's, we're trying to talk about what it's like in the weeds of running business. And I think some of these ideas that we talk about when it's just us are relevant to what we're doing now. And
it's
we
in
can talk
real
for days.
time, right?
Yeah, it's in real time.
Like
This
this
is happening today.
to
Yeah.
both of us all the time.
Yeah.
Everything we're talking about
Yeah.
throughout this podcast is
It's
all
real.
stuff that's real to us.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it's also real to others, and hopefully we're making a bit of a difference. But for me, I don't care, and this is about not being attached to the outcomes. Like I don't care how many listeners we've got. I don't care. I think the process and the exercise of doing this is important, and perhaps 100 years after we're gone, people will be on YouTube and stumbling on Bread and Butter podcast, going, Jesus,
Oh my
those
God.
are two handsome gingers.
right?
Oh man,
I can't believe they're dead.
yeah,
They
I can't believe
keep
they're
them
dead.
alive forever.
Exactly, but they're so smart and handsome, and
Man, so you really picture the future of the world to be pretty dark and bad, huh?
well, yeah, exactly.
When they're
well, I
looking
think
at us
of
like
I don't know whether it's Da Vinci or Van Gogh or one of these like creative people that we talk about today found their audience after they died.
It was Van Gogh. Did you know
Yeah.
the
There
Van
we go, Van
Gogh
Gogh.
Van Gogh didn't sell any. I think he sold one to his brother while he was alive.
Yeah,
Ever.
Yeah,
But,
so
but,
that's
there's
the one
an
thing.
interesting factoid. What artist sold more paintings than any other artist before they died? And
Picasso.
The answer is still Van Gogh because he was an art salesman before he got
Oh.
into painting art. So he literally sold more paintings
than any other artist, because that's the
by the time
business
he
he was
died.
in.
Yeah,
Just wasn't his art.
it wasn't his art.
Yeah, so there we go. So
Another fake fact from Sam Jones.
yeah, I love the fake facts. We
Well, it's
throw
not
them out.
fake, just round facts.
Yeah, it's round.
Round.
It's
the answer's in
conjecture.
there somewhere.
Yeah, and it might be true.
Might be, might not be.
Percentages of it are true.
Oh, we're going right back to punchy, aren't we?
Oh my God, we're punchy.
It's time to wrap this up.
Let's wrap it
Let's
up.
wrap it up, and we'll see you next week.
See you next
Kayla?
week. Yes, I'm away next week, but I can either Zoom in or it may be a solo show.
Ooh,
you.
I can pull it off,
Yeah.
or can I?
And that next week it is Saltchuck, I believe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
awesome, Nick.
Yeah.
Nick from Salt Chuck
Yeah,
will
Nick
be
from
on.
Saltchuck, and I
That's
wanted
an
to be
amazing
a
story
part of
because-
that, so I may try to Zoom in. But
His first business in Victoria was amazing.
what was it?
Noodlebox.
Oh, of course.
Noodlebox.
I didn't realize that.
He started off in a
Oh,
cart
I know,
on
Nick.
Government
Yes, I
Street.
know. Yes. Oh my goodness.
That's why it was so cool to get
Oh,
Nick
that's
on
pretty
board.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's
I
good.
mean, I love Salt Chuck Pie, but his story is deeper than that.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That was the reference to the noodle box, and I didn't make that connection.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
that's awesome.
I guess then you're going to have to zoom in for this next one.
Yes. No, I will for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
'cause,
I'll be here. I'll be up in Terrace, but I will be here on Zoom.
Well, you, like our audience, won't want to miss out on the next episode of the Bread and Butter Collective podcast.
Remember to be kind.
Be nice.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care, Kayla.
Bread and Butter Collective's membership includes the following local businesses: 2% Jazz, Bunny's Kitchen, Buzz Coffee House, Eagle Light, Big Wheel Burger, Blue Mountain Solutions, Bodega Tapas Wine Bar, Eva Schnitzel House, Farmsgate Foods and Catering, Victoria Chocolate and Company, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo Asian Street Food, the Culinary Arts Program at Camosun, Cafe Fantastico, Fall Epi, Harold Street Brewworks, Hey Happy, House of Botang, Nikkei Ramen Ya, Jenny Marie's Cracker Company, La Pasta, La Rue Patisserie, Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poco a Pinto Bar, Pizzeria Prima Strada, Keating Pizza, Roast, Table 9 Consulting, Sherwood Cafe and Bar, Sweets by Selena, The Collective Wine Bar and Kitchen, The Drake, Tapa Bar, The Nimble Bar Company, Ruth and Dean, The Whole Beast, The Wienery, Spoon's Diner, Truffles-inspired catering, and Zambries.
To hear more from the Bread and Butter Collective, go to checknews.ca/podcasts on Check Plus, or find us on your favorite podcasting platform.